I am back with another vape recycling vlog. This time I'm looking back at all the battery recycling chemistry stuff. What I've done is I've taken the black mass from the previous video, the stuff that we purified using a really strong base, and I've started to dissolve it up in some very powerful acid. And what that's going to do is it's going to break down all of the oxides, so the nickel, the cobalt, the lithium, and the manganese that's all in that black mass, and it's going to turn it into essentially a liquid. And from that point, I'm going to filter it, get rid of any of the excess graphite, and then I'm going to start doing the step-by-step extractions. And this video is going to focus on getting the manganese out of this mixture. But before I can do that, I need to dissolve it completely. As you can see, if I turn the stirring on a bit, not all of it's dissolved. Some of it is dissolved. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but there's a very red, sort of deep red hue to the liquid, which means that there's a lot of cobalt in there. But overall, I'm adding small amounts, just drop-wise, of hydrogen peroxide, which should serve as a little bit of a booster for the acid in there. And that should allow it to really dissolve quite rapidly. And I'm bringing the temperature up to 95 degrees, just below boiling, which again will increase the speed and power of the acid. But for now, I'm going to leave this to sit for a good couple of hours, dissolve as much as I can, filter it off, and then we're going to start doing the manganese extraction. So it should be a pretty interesting video today. Hopefully I actually get it right and don't mess something up, but I'll check back in a couple of hours. Okay, so not everything has dissolved. It's been a good couple of hours. You can still see there's a decent amount of the black mass in there. Now, even with some quite powerful acid and hydrogen peroxide to really boost its reactivity, while heating it quite high, not everything's sort of broken down and dissolved. So I think I'm gonna move on to the next step anyway. There's enough red in the solution that I'm pretty confident I've got at least some of everything that I'm looking for. So the next step is to filter this off, get rid of any of the excess black mass and graphite, and really move on to the next step once I've got a nice, clean, filtered solution. Yeah, you can see a lot of the black mass is still in there, which isn't great, but again, there should still be enough that I can move on to the next stage. And yes, you can see a nice clear red liquid coming out the bottom, which is exactly what I want. Everything's been filtered now. We've got a nice clear red liquid here with no sort of stray graphite black mass particles floating around in it, which is exactly what we are going to need to have for a manganese extraction and all the future extractions. Interestingly, it's very red, which means that there's a lot of cobalt in there. You'd think that a vape battery would have more nickel in it, which would give it a green color, but I suppose not. Now, before I move on to actually getting the manganese out, this needs to be neutralized. So currently it is very acidic. If we just give it a quick probe here on the pH strip, you can see that's a very, very red, very acidic, as opposed to this, which is a hydroxide, which is very, very basic. So it's a nice blue color. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly add this into here until this is pretty much a neutral pH, sitting around 4 or 5, slightly acidic, near neutral. And that's what's going to be best for the manganese extraction, because once it's neutralized, I can heat it up to just below boiling and add an oxidizing agent, which will oxidize the manganese out. That'll come out as a solid precipitant. I can filter it, and then I'll just be left with this liquid. It'll still be a red color, and it will have cobalt, nickel, and lithium in it, and nothing else. So I'm going to slowly add some of this until this gets to the correct pH and check back when I'm done. That went quite well. All of the acid has been pretty much neutralized. If I were to dip it with the pH strip, you can see there that it's really come back to being pretty much neutral, maybe slightly acidic. There's a little bit of red on there because of the actual cobalt in solution. But pretty much all I have to do now is heat it up to around 95 degrees Celsius, just below boiling. And what I'm going to do after it's at that point is drop in a little bit of this, which is just an oxidizer. What that oxidizer will do is at really high temperatures in a pretty much neutral solution, it will oxidize out the manganese as manganese dioxide, which is a solid precipitate. I can then filter that out and I'll just be left with filtered manganese dioxide. It should be very pure, and then lithium, cobalt and nickel still in the liquid solution. And from that point I can keep doing more chemistry, which I'll probably cover in future videos, and get the rest of the stuff. But what I'm doing today is heating this until about 95, 100 degrees. So I got a little while to wait, stirring it, dropping some of that oxidizer in, and then letting it sit for a good couple of hours to really oxidize everything out, run it through a filter, and I should be left with manganese dioxide. Hopefully. Everything's gone fairly smoothly up until now, so I'm hoping that that trend continues. But yeah, I'll check back in another couple of hours once this is at the right temperature, and we'll drop some of this in. And we are right at the 90-degree mark there. It's hard to kind of focus the camera, and there we go. This has been heating for a good couple of hours and been stirring. So what I'm gonna do is crank the stirring up a little bit. I'm gonna drop in some of this oxidizer. Now off the bat, it won't really do anything. You're not gonna see a big color change. I have to let it sit for a couple of hours at heat. But after a little while, you should see this solution turn from a kind of clearish red to a darker brown color. It's already sort of starting to do it. It's hard to see on camera. And I'm just gonna let it sit, probably continue to dump some of that in. And then after a good couple of hours, hopefully it should have oxidized all of the manganese. I'll be able to get it in one filter pass, and then that should be done. But yeah, as you can see on the camera, it is all sort of starting to turn a bit brown. It is a little bit difficult. The iPhone camera doesn't have the best sort of ability to grab really small color changes, but you can see some difference there. So I'm gonna keep putting this in and check back in a second. Righto, that's all done. It's been a good few hours. You can see that a lot of the water has boiled off, which is hopefully not too bad. Does make the filtering easier. And you probably pretty clearly see the solution has turned black because there is a lot of manganese in there, which is to be expected. Now, I've got the vacuum filter set up here. Just got a normal filter in the bottom and a coffee filter just to make it a little bit easier to get the stuff out. So what I'm going to start doing now is slowly filtering off this manganese. So the first bit, the liquid, it shouldn't be too big of a problem. There we go. And eventually I'll get down to the bottom and there will be a whole bunch of manganese in the bottom of this beaker. And then what you can see is that once it's filtered, the liquid goes back to being that red color with the cobalt and the lithium and nickel in it. And that is a good thing. That is exactly what we want to see. And you can start to see up here bits of manganese all around the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter all of this off, and then I'm going to jump back in with the camera when it's done, and we should have a beaker with our solution to keep doing chemistry with, and we should have very pure manganese dioxide completely filtered out. And there we have it. That is manganese dioxide. Got quite a lot from these vape batteries, so I'd assume that they are pretty manganese heavy. And then here is the solution now that everything's filtered. As you can see, it's gone back to the original color, which is exactly what you want. And just to prove that it is in fact manganese dioxide, I've got a little bit of hydrogen peroxide here. Don't need much. And on this little piece of filter paper, if I just drop some, you can see there that it fizzes up. And that is the proof that this is in fact manganese dioxide that I've extracted from a vape battery. So that's going to do it for this video. In future videos, I'm going to keep messing with this and getting more stuff out of it. But all in all, a successful extraction of manganese dioxide from a vape battery. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, have a good one, eh?